Okie doke. Without further ado, let's look at some of the power tips and tricks as we go along. I'll tell you what, do me a favor, throw into chat a power tip of your own. If you want to, give me your contacts or send me an email. If you can add to this list, you'll score yourself an Adobe Muse Master, a Rockstar mug. If it's something that I add to my portfolio and I don't have, how's that for an incentive? So send me your ideas. I'll send you a mug if it's something that I use in the tips and tricks. But there are 18 of them, at least 17, and I only got halfway through it yesterday in about 40 minutes. So let's go ahead and jump in. Power tip trick number 1, switching color picker sliders between RGB and HSB. You may know this. I did not know it, and it was really important for me to figure out. So it made my top list at least. As you're working within Muse, I'm here in a template. I'm using one of the Muse themes template called Hearth. So thanks to the Muse theme folks, it's a nice way to just be able to dig into a well-designed site to show off different techniques. I appreciate that. Let's say I was working and I wanted to change the color green here on this object. And I opened up my color panel here. It's kind of interesting. I even forget how the default is. I think it defaults to RGB. And I know that when I have worked with this, I was frustrated by the color panel because what if I want to lighten up the green? I don't have a sophisticated enough understanding of color to understand how to make this green lighter using RGB values. So I was kind of surprised that here in this drop down, you can toggle over to HSB and just reduce the saturation, for example, on that shade of green to lighten it up if that's what you're after. So I need a little bell to ring, but ching, there's tip number 1. Number 2, use inline glow to colorize PNG graphics. So through the years of Muse, when we first shipped, we didn't really support scalable vector graphics, SVGs, and everyone needed to rely on images for icons. And then we had sort of a baby step forward where we allowed you to include, in essence, vector or resolution-independent icons if you created a font using something like Font Awesome and then typed the characters of that font on your keyboard. I think that we found, actually, I'm going to check on chat, make sure you guys are all good. It's looking spookily. Let me just check here real quick. Okay, good. So I don't know. Sometimes you never have time to really learn about aspects of your technology, and I don't even understand why how spaces work on the Macintosh. So as long as you can see my top 10 list, we're in good shape. We were talking about PNG graphics. So in some instances, you may have images for your icons in a site. If you can go resolution independent, if you can provide them as an SVG or perhaps embed them as a font if you use them frequently, I'd encourage it. But there still are times that you'll have resolution dependent PNG graphics, and it's very easy to colorize those in the app. So if I come back into Muse, let's just go ahead and create a new page for simplicity's sake here. So I've got that page loaded up here. And I want to place some icons. So I'm going to pull that on File to place some icons that I've grabbed. And these are, again, a number of icons. If we look at them, they're PNG files. They're rather large in size. I'll just grab a few of them. I'll click the Open button. And I'm just going to press and drag them onto the canvas. Looks like I've got some duplicates here. Some funny dragging. And let's try that. I'm going to grab just 1 or 2 more and place those on the canvas. So press and drag and press and drag. That's funny. Never know why it drags up instead of down. Okay, so I've got 4 icons now. And let's say I decided this pretty donut pink was not perfect. What I can do is go to my swatches panel, and I can have a number of colors that I bring into my panel. We'll show you a little bit more about how colors work. If I go to the Hearth website for a moment and I grab, let's say, some of the colors that are being used here, just grab a bit of content here. I'm going to use, let's go down to the footer. If I grab this footer section here, including that silly go button that I've now made a light shade of green, and I go back to my new document. I'm going to go into the swatches panel, and I'm just going to right click on that panel, and I'm going to delete all unused colors. What you'll notice is I have no colors in the project right now. When I come in and paste the footer from that other file, notice that in pasting that content, it brings over the colors. I can even delete the footer now, but the colors will be retained with the file. So that's a handy way. If you have a set of colors from one project that you quickly want to carry over, just copy some of those color elements, bring it into your new document and delete it. So that's a little bonus tip there. But now that I have these colors here, I might want to apply them to my site. So I'll come in and select my object, and if I just say I want to colorize it, it does the wrong thing. So it's going to colorize the back of the container, the full container, and not the actual placed object. Instead, with the object selected, if I go to the Effects panel and swing on over to the third tab, the Glow tab, this was actually discovered by Ali Pordelli of Cookie.com. He gets tons of cred because nobody on the team, none of the engineers had actually really realized that this CSS approach would work within the application. So it was a fun little trick. If I come in and click on Glow, change the opacity to a full 100%, change the blur. I think if you max it out, you do it at 250 for the blur value. Grab a color. So let's say I want to use that dark shade of green. And then click on Inner Glow. Notice my little donut back here. When I hit that, the Inner Glow works. If I come in and change the blur for a moment back to about 50, you could start to see what it does. Let's do it even lighter, maybe 10. So see how, if you look rather closely, it is kind of filling in from the outside in. And you'll just want to dial that value up. To play it safe, I go with the full 250. Now that I've done that, I have basically colorized my graphic element. If I want to apply that to lots of other objects, what I can do is come into the graphic styles area and create a new graphic style. This is a CSS style. I can call it Color Me. And with that style now, I can come in and select these other icons and apply it really quickly. Now, the best part about it is as you're working, you may decide, remember how we were messing around with the green before, you may decide that you don't want that exact shade of green. It might be a little too electric, let's say, for this design. I can come into the swatches panel, and when I right click, select swatch options, and maybe I'll darken it up to something a little warmer. When I click OK, because that is a named style, that is a swatch that has been defined in the project, it's going to update all instances of the swatch throughout the site. Okay, like I said, I tend to run out of time on this, so we're going to go quickly into this dark night. Place Photoshop files with specific layer selection. Now, many of you know I was raised in fireworks, and I still feel more comfortable there, and I don't do a ton of photo image editing for the web, to be honest. But in Photoshop, there are very sophisticated designers that use Photoshop. You may still be of the mind that you like to build out a Photoshop comp to show your client before you build it in Muse. You may start in Muse and do wireframes, but the look and feel, the idea book, the corporate identity, let's say, might occur for you in Photoshop. That's a very common practice for designers. Especially if you're working with a designer and you're doing the development of the website. When you work in Photoshop, if you do a good job of it, which I didn't, and name your layers intelligently or create layer groups, you can come up with distinct components that you use in Photoshop that you'd like to then deliver into Muse as you go along. So the way to take advantage of layers within Photoshop is to pull down on File to Place. So notice I can place a Photoshop button. That's another feature where if in Photoshop you've gone in and let's say you create a really detailed button. This is kind of back in the day when buttons with gradients and three-dimensional attributes were really popular. Now that we're in the world of flat design, it's, I think, less important. But if you define layers in Photoshop for the up, down, over, and active state, you can apply that to a container or a button by selecting Place Photoshop Button. In this instance, I'm just going to select Place, and I'll go ahead and grab something that I do want to place. So I've got this kind of pigeon specs page, and it had just a sense of identity, a look and feel for how images would be handled, how the colors would all work together. that the person who designed the Pigeon website produced as one of their early steps. So I'm going to go ahead and open that file up. And as I mentioned, I did not do at all a good job of naming my layers in a good way. So I have to hunt and peck a little bit here. But notice when I go to place that Photoshop file, I can either import the composite image, the entire image as a whole, or I can go to a layer. Now, as I work, I can click here and see what's meaningful about the layers. So there's a photo there that I might want to bring over. There's a button, some other elements. Now, as I go along, I told you this is a mess and I never seem to think to clean it up. Just looking for some meaningful bits. I can come in and just select with the Command key or Control key on my PC a random set of layers here. So as I work, I'll see if there's something I want to add. And just by holding the Command key, it will continue to add the elements. So I'm kind of poking around here for some meaningful bits. I'm not going to get much juicy stuff here, but all right, good enough. So notice that I held the Command key and I've selected a subset of layers. The important bit here is to clip layer contents. If you'll notice, I've got a number of layers that are spanning kind of a large area. If I don't clip the contents, it's going to trim the clipping area to be the same across all of these, which will be messy in Muse. So I'm going to clip those layer contents, click OK. And now I get that place gun, as it's known, where I can click and release to place all that content. Now, kind of a funny thing happens, oh, Dana, QE engineer, in that all of that content seems to come all the way over on the side. So I'm going to select it and bring it over. Now, you'll notice a nice thing happens. By default, everything I just placed is in a group, which is awfully nice. If I go to the Assets panel, you'll see they're separate assets. And they're just grouped together as one. So I can come in and ungroup that content. So if I come in, select all, I can say ungroup. And I can select each of the individual items. So there's my logo that I now have as a separate placed item. There's that funny little button that I brought over. Okay, so a nice productivity tip. Now, since that productivity tip, lots of things have evolved, like Creative Cloud Libraries, which does a beautiful job of actually, in fact, let me show this. This is how I never get past number 7. I'm going to open up Photoshop. Not that I don't use it much, but it's not first on the list. It's kind of funny. And when within Photoshop, this is a Creative Cloud Library tip, but if I go into Photoshop and I open up that spec file, so I go to the Power Tips, Pigeon Specs, and I click Open, I should get an alert that says, hey, you know what? I see a lot of little elements here. Would you like me to create a new library in the Creative Cloud and extract this content for you into the library? So if I say yes, it will bring over all of the usual elements that are here. Let me just go ahead and show it. If I say create new library, so I let Photoshop go through there. Now there are things that can be in a Creative Cloud library that don't necessarily work directly in Muse because the library is sort of different for each product that it works with. But that library has been created, and I'm just going to go ahead and get out of here quickly. Let's go back into Muse. So here we are in the Muse application, and if I go to my CC library now and just look at my list, I should have a new one. It's called Pigeon Specs, and in it I get all sorts of nice goodies. I've got a lot of colors because the designer did some experimentation with lots of shades of colors. I can delete the ones I don't want and keep the ones I do want. There's all my images and elements. So another terrific way of going from Photoshop into Muse would be the Creative Cloud library. How's that for one-upping my tips and tricks? All right, number 4, using command keys to jump around the site. I do this a lot. I probably could do it more as I'm working. But some of the nice bits, if I go to the Hearth project, zoom this out a little bit, notice I have a number of pages here. And this is actually a template that was designed before we delivered responsive. So it has alternate layouts. It has just really a framework for tablet, smartphone, and desktop. So as I'm working, let's say I want to take my content on the buying page and bring it over to the buying page here. This is true in the world of responsive as well, except that with responsive, when you have multiple breakpoints, you're in essence looking at all of those different classes of devices on the same page. In this instance, it's separate layouts, but you still need to jump around in either case as you're working. So let's say I am here on the buying page and I want to bring some content over. So if I zoom out here and decide I want to start to bring these elements to my new place, I'm going to hit Command-C to copy it. If I hit Command-J, it allows me to jump to somewhere else. Now, I may know that I want to go to the buying page, but I don't want to go to the desktop instance of that buying page. Notice that in the drop-down here, I can see the buying page for phone. So I jump right over to the relevant page there, and I could start to move this very large desktop content over to that phone layout. So hitting Command-J just lets you jump to different locations. Another one I really like is to hit Command-M, and Command-M brings you back to the site plan. So I could be on an individual page. Notice the tabs are still open here. I've got the desktop buying. I've got the home page open. I've got the phone buying. But as long as I can Command-M, and go back to my site plan and bring up a master, for example, go back to Command-M and change out pages. It's just a nice way to get home without having to keep coming and clicking on the plan mode button up there. Next on my list, number 5, pasting with breakpoints to apply to a new page. All right, let me show you this kind of pretty quickly and simply. I'm going to go in and open a site that I have that has that does have breakpoints already defined. So let's try a good old pigeon, and I'll open that guy up. I think this one is with breakpoints still. Let's take a look. So notice here on this site, if you don't see breakpoints, that means you may have them hidden. So by default, we often, when you open up a legacy file, we'll open it in this way without the breakpoint bar or this responsive feature set showing. If I pull that on view, I can show breakpoints, and I see there are a number of breakpoints here. Now, whether it's right or wrong, only time will tell, but we took an approach with Muse where your master page allows you to define different breakpoints than your active page would have. And the reason for that is you'll notice how this pigeon site, its breakpoints are defined. They're pretty much as fluid breakpoints, so the content is going to flow within a breakpoint, but they're kind of structured towards a desktop device, a tablet device, and a smartphone. So pretty consistent with what I just showed you for the Hearth site that was alternate layouts. I'm kind of taking that same methodology for my header and footer content on my responsive site. Now, once I've got this all set, I may want to bring these exact breakpoints over to a particular page or quickly bring them to an entirely different site or a different project. The magic or the little trick here is to come in and select any one item. So I'm just going to select the pigeon logo here. And I'll come on in and I'll copy it. And just for fun, I'll say I'm going to go File New, create a brand new site, so nothing up my sleeve here. And I'll come on into that home page. And when I paste, I'm going to right click, or I could pull down on Edit to Paste, I imagine. I'm a big right click fan here. So when I go to paste, I can either just paste that pigeon logo. I can paste it in place, which is going to put it in the same X and Y location as the source layout was, or I can paste and create breakpoints. So notice the big purple bar there at the top of the screen. It's only reflecting one breakpoint. When I say paste and create breakpoints, it comes in and creates all of those specific breakpoints at different spots. Now, it looks like my logo is white, so you can't tell that it's here, but similar to the trick I showed you with colors that travel with the project, I could delete that pigeon logo. I don't really need it, but I've very quickly brought over any of the breakpoints that I wanted from one project or one page on my site to another. Okay? All right, we're moving right along. Number 6, customize hyperlinks in the dynamic menu, and if you're not ready to publish, your mobile layout or individual pages on your site, go ahead and disable it. Let's take a look at that one. So I'm going to close out some of these sort of scratch projects. We'll go ahead and hide the pigeon. I don't think we need this again. Maybe. We'll leave it around. Let's delete this other project and go back to the hearth layout. Okay, so for this layout, I have a number of pages. You see them here. I have sort of listings down at the bottom, and I have buying and selling as a child page here in the site hierarchy. As I work, I may have more children pages. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to have home 1. And just for laziness, I'm going to duplicate that to a second page, call it home 2. So one might assume for a moment that I'd have multiple listings and I could have a sub-menu for the listings that brought you to the individual homes. Now, for this design, when the folks at Muse Themes designed it, they used a dynamic menu, a widget that allows you to automatically keep track of the names of pages, where they are in the site plan, and link to them automatically using the dynamic menu widget. So when I come into my master here, I can see that there's that dynamic menu widget. I'll just center it up a little bit here. And because it is a smart little widget, if I decide that, for example, contact should move to the left of about, when I come back to my master page, notice that contact is now to the left of about. So it remembered that. It also knows to automatically link all of these pages together. So that's the magic, the beauty of a dynamic menu. If you're working, though, and let's say you have a real site, and a real site might be that, yes, you're going to provide the home, listings, and buying pages as a Muse designer in the Muse site. But for example, let's say the contact page needs to roll up to the parent hearth site, and it's not going to actually be a page that you host yourself as part of your Muse website. You can create exceptions in your navigation in the site plan. So what I want to do is have the word contact appear here, but when someone clicks on it, I want to navigate them to a different page on a different site. So notice if I click on these individual items, I see the word buying, and in my control strip up above, I don't see the hyperlinks menu, and that can be frustrating. The reason for that is that this is a dynamically generated link that is based on the site plan, but we do allow you to make an exception to that. So if I jump back out to my site plan and I decide that the contact page should not actually drive to my page, should drive to another page instead, what I do is click on it, and in that right mouse menu, notice I have menu options here. I can exclude the page from the menus. I'll show you that in just a second. I can include it with the hyperlink or without. If I click on without, and then I come back into that menu, remember how clicking on any of these gave me no hyperlink menu? When I now click on contact, I can get to the hyperlinks. And I might come in and say, you know what, go ahead and go to adobe.com. And instead of just taking you away from the site, open up a new page when you're working. So if I pull down now on preview the site in the browser, the first time I do this, it's going to render the entire site, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, into my local machine. So this is a way to locally preview your content without having to push it live anywhere. It takes a little while the first time. It's rendering the entire site, but that's also cached. Similar to when you FTP up to a hosting platform, we cache and we remember what we've already rendered. And if you make a change, the next time you preview will happen pretty quickly. So notice I can jump around to each of these pages now, and those pages change. But when I click on contact, it actually is going to open up. Let's see. Is it working? Kind of funny. Buying. Contact does not look like it's going anywhere. Let's see if I made a mistake. I'm going to select it up again. Looks like I didn't do the deed. www.adobe.com. I'll hit enter. And now you can see if it does really render much more quickly. Preview the entire site in the browser again. Should be a quick process this time. It's checking for changes. All right. So we've got the listing page, buying page. Clicking on contact takes me to adobe.com. Okay. So another tip is, let's say you are working and you have a client, and the client wants to build out a whole new page. So we've got this selling section, but you're not ready to expose it. It's not done yet. The client is still iterating and giving you changes in your new design. At the same time, your client asks you to come in and make a change to one of your live pages that you've already published. Rather than creating two versions of your site with one version full of changes and the other one live and trying to keep track of all that, you can come in and have pages that are in process that you're not ready to actually publish live in your project and keep it local to yourself. So the way you do that is to click on any one of these objects and just uncheck the export page. Now, when we first delivered this, we got a lot of support questions because people would do it, and then a month later, they'd come in, make changes to the page, publish it up, and could not figure out why the page was not showing up. So when I uncheck the export page, notice it now gives me this nice grayed out look to the icon, and I get a little page turn here that tells you that it's not going to export. So if you do that, remember you've done it, and be sure to turn it off when you're ready to take the content live. I'm going to check on chat real quick, see how the world's going. Dana, if there's anything you need from me, put it in the QE pod, and I will look there from time to time and see what questions that might be specific to what I'm showing need to be covered again. Okay. Let's see. Number 7, create an expandable menu with a composition widget. This one came up from Steve Harris of Muse Themes. He did a tips and tricks session at a Max a couple years back. So thank you, Steve. What his point was is, let's say I do have a site here and I want to come into the listings and start to show the individual homes that are for sale. I can select this dynamic menu, and in the flyout, instead of showing only the top level pages from the site plan, if I click it, I can jump to all pages. What you'll notice is I can now see the child pages underneath my main pages with a little arrow here. So if I struggle quite a lot, I could come in and make these attractive, make them look like the rest of my navigation. But it's always quite limited. It doesn't really give you what's known as like a mega menu or a really complex menu as you're working. So instead of that approach, I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to come in. Let's just duplicate this navigation out for a second. So I'll press and drag that off. And for this nav, what I'm going to do is delete the actual menu widget that I pulled out of the widgets library. And I'm going to steal a little bit of text because I'm feeling a little lazy. And I'm going to just come up here and, in essence, create a text container. So I'm just going to paste that text. It's just simple text. We'll make it a little larger, maybe. It's funny that you want to keep going back there. Okay, so a little bit on the big side, but it'll do. And I can come in and by hand create my menu pages. So I lose out on this idea that I'm able to dynamically link and dynamically update any of my page attributes. This is a very manual way of doing it, but it has some real advantages. So I'll come in, I've got home, and I can link to home. I can come in and add listings. And let's do one more. Add buying here. And I'll go ahead and space these out a little bit more reasonably. So I've got these guys, and of course I can come in and link them manually. So in home here, I can type home and make sure I select not tablet, not phone, but desktop home. I'll go into listings, and I'm not going to click to connect that one. I'll go into buying, and I'll link buying to my desktop instance. Okay, what I want to do for listings now, let's get rid of the second nav because I don't really need that for reference anymore. What I want to do is a more robust drop-down for my listings. So I'm going to come into the widgets library, and I'm going to select the composition widget, press and drag it on the canvas. The composition widget is magical. It's really the most sophisticated, simple widget that we have in our widget library. It allows you to place inside of it other widgets and just about any type of content you'd like. So I'm going to come in and delete the wrong thing. I'm going to come and delete the third and second trigger of this trigger target set. I'm going to grab the first trigger and I'm going to bring it right up there next to listing. And I'm going to move the target, that which is revealed when that trigger is clicked, just below it. Now I'm going to not spend too much time styling this out, but let's say as I was working, I'm going to lock that little rectangle. It's kind of bugging me. I wanted to have some social media buttons. So I press and drag those. Whoa, Dani. Try that again. I'm going to cut them and I'm going to paste them on top. Another lazy boy trick there. So actually, I'm just full of power tips and tricks. Let me do that again real quick. So when I went in and drag this off, notice that it's layering behind this container here. If I can come in and I cut that content to the clipboard, click on anything in the layer hierarchy. So this could be sandwiched between top nav, lower nav in my layers panel. As long as I click on what I want the content to sit just in front of, when I paste, it's going to paste on top. So a nice way to just, instead of going to the layers panel and figuring out all the layers, click where you want the object to sit just in front of, and it will nest that pasted content just where you want it. All right, I got my social media buttons. Let's say just for fun, I came in and because I can do just about everything, I'm going to go into my widgets library and I'm going to grab a YouTube video and drag that on the canvas. Now notice I'm not going to drag it up into that container. See how big it is? It's going to make that target much bigger than I want it to be. So I'm going to first drag it on the canvas and I'm going to resize it to something a little better. And then I will bring it into that container so it doesn't explode my container. Now for my trigger, I could take the listings text and just paste it inside of it, or I could just overlay this trigger in a lazy way here and make sure that it's filled with none and stroked with none. So it becomes, in essence, an invisible container on top there. The next thing I want to do is with the widget selected, either the trigger or the target, in the flyout, I want to make sure that it's set that on rollover, this behavior occurs. And notice the hide target. I want it to hide whenever I roll out of either the trigger or the target. That's really important. That was a feature we really had to add. And then I have this nice JavaScript fade between it, and I can set the speed of that fade. The last thing I want to do is come in and make sure that I have hide all initially checked, and I may or may not want triggers on top depending on how I'm working. I'm going to click both of those, and let's go ahead and let's see, did I say hide all initially? Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to not show the lightbox parts there. And I'll pull that on file to preview just this page in the browser. And what you'll notice if I did the right thing, which I didn't, I have a rollover state there that's odd. Sorry. This bugs me. I bet it bugs you, but somehow it always grabs the active state. So you have to go through and remember to go to the normal state and undo. I really wish we would start in the normal state. Now that I've done that, this styling is inherited. So to quickly come in and strip out styling for everything below it, click on rollover. Notice the trash can there, mouse down, and active trash can. So in essence, I have inheritance starting at the top and rolling all the way down there. With that done, I'm going to preview in browser, hitting Shift-Command-E just to be quick about it. I've got my home navigation. I've got a rollover state. It's linked directly to the home page. But notice my listings. I've got a bit of a big container, but if I roll over that container, I can come into any of my social media buttons. I can actually start playing a video. And it's only when I roll out of either the trigger, which is the word listings, or its target, this region here. When I roll away, it's going to fade away. So the trigger brings it up, and rolling out of either the trigger or the target makes it go away. All right, quick time check. See, I'm not getting any further. This means you have to come to my Facebook Live session next week. It's on the events area. I think it's at 10 o'clock on Wednesday because I'm a slowpoke. All right, let's keep going. Number 8, Do you know exactly how magical the vertical move handle is? I've mentioned this in some of the new feature videos that we've done, but it's pretty magical. When you're working on a site and that site has lots and lots of long content, I don't have terrific examples of it here, but you'll get the gist. So I'm working on this site, and if I zoom out on it, there's a decent amount of content here. The more you work with responsive design, the more you'll find yourself taking blocks of content, resizing groups. So if I wanted to make this a responsive layout, I'd end up taking each of these tiles, and maybe in a tablet, I'd go 2 across, and then on a desktop or a phone layout, I'd go 1 up for the entire length of the page. Being able to have the vertical move handle is magical, but it's not the most intuitive piece of content. If you don't notice it, you won't notice it. So what it allows you to do is, as you're working, let's say this block of text here, I want to move everything down below it. Now I'm always able, let me go ahead and zoom in and sort of exaggerate this as though it were a really big site. If I wanted to move this content down, I'd have to zoom out, come on in, select it, then zoom back up again. I can go up so that I see what the heck I'm trying to do. And if I miss a piece, it messes everything up. So instead, what you're able to do is at that very detailed level, so let's say I'm right here at a detail level and I really want to just move this content slightly down on the page. Notice that when I click on any piece of content, here in the right, the magical move handle appears. So when I click an object, I see the move handle, and what it's going to do is move all of the content from that point down, up or down on the design. So it's a really quick way to come in and move that content. If instead I wanted to select everything to move it to another layer, for example, or delete it, I can click that one object, double click on the move handle, which selects everything below, and again, I could come in and decide to move to a different layer or add to a library if I really wanted to. So that's a selecting of all objects from that point down. Okay, all right. We still have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to get a little bit ahead. This one should probably take me a good 10 minutes. So create slideshows with categories via nested widgets. Trying to think what I meant about that. So chances are this is what I meant with that. If I come back to this site, let's see what we've got here. He has a bunch of images on this page. I'm going to see if we've got a slideshow. I feel like we do. Okay, this is a slideshow. And if you'll notice, he's got this lovely sort of configuration for this particular offering. So this property, Oakdale Avenue, he's got the bedroom, bathroom, and he's also got a slideshow here with thumbnails. Now, if you want to have a more complex configuration, remember how I told you about the magic of a composition widget? That can come into play here. So what I'm going to do is step back, and I'm going to take all of this content, and I'm going to drag it off on the side. And I'm going to ask you guys to play pretend like I have 2 different sets of content. What I want to do is come on into that widget library, and I'm going to get the composition widget. I'm going to drag it on the canvas. There's another tip that I think comes a little bit later in the world here, and that's whenever you come to something that's already styled, a quick way to delete all the junk that we put into a widget so that you can understand how it works. Once you have that understanding, we don't need to have all the images and text that we happen to include with a widget. If you right-click on that widget, you can come in to clear all styling and also clear all widget contents. I now have a whole lot of nothing, so I'm going to go under View here and Show Frame Edges, so I can see that guy right now. What I want to do is really just come up with a category or class of content that repeats. So I'm going to drag this container a little larger and go ahead and have this guy here. And then I'll come in and select the content that I have and put it in that first instance. So notice even though the content is bigger than the container automatically grows to encompass what I dragged on it. That's both a feature and a pain in the butt. So you have to be sure when you drag anything into a container that it's the right size and that you place it appropriately, or else you'll have to resize that outer container. So I have that first instance. If I come into, let's say, a second instance, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can get on that trigger. And I'm going to dupe it. And in the second instance, again, we're going to be really boring and bring all the same content over. I'll bring part of it, so believe me. Come in and paste that second set, paste it inside the container. See, I did a bad thing. I pasted it inside my trigger. So I've got to click off that trigger, paste, so it pastes somewhere inside that container. So I now can come in. The idea here is that you might have just different groups. It's a widget inside of a widget, so that you can easily toggle between nested elements. I could have full slideshows here over and over again, nested inside of a composition widget. All right, I do want to stop because I do want to make you guys all come to Facebook Live next week. So let me do this. I'm going to swing back there to that event, just so we all know what we're talking about. And I'm going to take questions. So if you have questions that I didn't cover or Dana didn't cover in what we've just talked about now, don't look at my Facebook page. You never know what you're going to find. Okay. So this is the guy you want to keep an eye out for, which is going to be Facebook Live Power User Tips and Tricks, Wednesday at 10 a.m. And the week after that, as I mentioned, I'm traveling, so I won't be around. But please come join us. Help carry the jam sessions. No, the dueling banjos are not going to come over to Facebook Live. I think many of you would be happy with that. Let's just see. So if anybody asked a question that I should have caught, you can throw it into the chat one more time. And Nancy actually brings up an excellent point. Tell me about new jam sessions. What haven't we covered? In the new world of Facebook, if you're not going to the YouTube channel, because I probably will not record it as a separate YouTube instance, it's a little complex. I'll probably rely on Facebook. Just to show you this a little bit, I am a little nervous about legacy here. If you are used to looking at our world and you want to see some of the jam sessions or recordings, click on videos here in Facebook, and you'll see there's a featured video here. And then below that, we've got a whole bunch of the jam sessions. If you click show more, it'll bring up all the sessions. If you're looking for a particular jam, let's say preparing assets and you don't quite see it, just show all, hit Command F in the browser and say assets. So it's not as great as being able to search and find things in a more robust CMS, but I think it's a pretty good way to keep that video library relevant and available to the Facebook community. We'll have, the top 20 most recent recordings here. But we were talking about future jam session topics, just as I decided to stop sharing my screen. I'm back. It's bright red. It's easy to click over there. So let's look at what we had for a future topic. So workarounds for responsive. I agree. It's like we can't cover it too much, but you need to tell me more about what you need to know more about. So the question here is, or the request is, a new jam session, learning to work around for responsive design. Much of styling is not working because of responsive, so it would be great to see workarounds, etc. Sure. It tends to be a nitty-gritty. My goal there is not to do a little flashy video, but show you some of the realities and tips and tricks for working with the feature set for responsive. So we can put that on the docket. I would say it's going to be a Facebook Live session a couple weeks out. So I'm traveling the week after next, so likely the week of August 15th, we will do it. So hopefully that will be good. I'll work on it in the meantime. If there are more trouble areas around responsive that you want to make sure I cover, send me an email. I'll put my email address here. Don't spam me. Get in line if you want to spam me. Everybody seems to have my email address. So I think we will call it at that. We're about 10 minutes early. So Stephen's talking about topics for how did you do that. I agree. We never get enough of that. So I'm happy to rotate back through there. The nice thing is that through the years, I'll go ahead and do this because we have 10 more minutes and I'm not going anywhere if you guys want to stay. So if you go to muse.adobe.com, there are good buckets of information. One is in the events area. I've linked out recordings. Now, with Facebook Live, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore because that's the problem with Facebook is it's there, but there's no permalink. There's no absolute. But when I come into the events area, notice that you can see all of the past recordings here. So there are jam sessions if you want to filter around with that. The tutorials area, we've tried to work pretty hard lately to make sure we reflect a lot of quick information in the tutorials area. So with each new release, we've been doing really quick videos, so maximum 5 minutes, I think. You'll come in. We did a lot this time. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new videos, and then the ever-present Building Your First Site in Muse. If any of you are lynda.com fans, we've got a Lynda title now within the Lynda series with a different asset that you can start to work with. You can go ahead and check that out in the Lynda land. But we do have those there, and we have some of the longer-term articles here. So hopefully we're meeting your needs with quick videos around specific features. And as Stephen mentioned, and I didn't catch who it was, Nancy as well, maybe. Yes. For future jam session topics, I agree with you. Let's just keep banging on tips and tricks for responsive and productivity aspects of the tool. Okay. So I'm reading what Nancy wrote. Another suggestion for jam could be a best practice session. I watched an earlier jam and remember something about best practices to create fixed point. I agree. So yes. We can do a couple of things. We can talk about how do you first off, what are the goals with responsive? So we could have a session that really focuses on just best practices for responsive, how you plan out your project. I'm happy to do that and kind of dig through the archives. And then the second one would be probably how did you do that, tips and tricks for using the responsive feature set to achieve some of the work that we see there in Site of the Day. Sounds like a nice happy medium. So look for some of those starting on August 15. I'm still going to number my Facebook Live sessions. So this is the close of Jam Session 185, perhaps the last in the Jam Session series. But recording 186 will continue on Facebook Live in a few weeks. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And keep all the feedback coming. Thank you, Dana, for being with us today. We will catch you again soon.